First date. Do you like your man with a little facial hair? 17-year-old me asks, rubbing his fuzzy chin. Gail stretches like a cat and gives him a glance from over her shoulder. I prefer a clean shave. The date hasn't changed. We've simply moved later into that same night. I remember every detail that took us from our audition to sitting together in Gail's old station wagon. 6 hours later, with the chilly night outside and our warm bodies inside, the windows have become hooded with a coat of fog. Gail traces her fingers along the glass, drawing shapes, seeing lamplight shine through the crude line of Gail's painted heart, feeling his fingers curling over Gail's legs as she stretches them across his lap. My younger self, feeling the raw nerve of the moment, comments, "If it's going to rain, I wish it would just rain already." "You're talking to her about the weather?" Nicholas asks. He chuckles and a "ho, ho, ho" comes out, unnerving him. I smirk. You need to remember I was 17. I may have been popular, as you say, but that was only because I worried so much about making everyone like me. I was still learning how to have real meaningful friendships. I had no idea how to talk to girls. "Sure, I think I understand. You aren't sure if she's into you, so you want her to tell you. If you're going to need an umbrella." "Right now," I say, pointing at my younger self, "that kid is like a deer in headlights." I remember just how I felt when I was in his place. The radio reverberating with a remote voice, reaching us as though from some pocket of humanity, deep within the center of the earth. He lies there beside her, the whole universe suddenly in vibrant color. Their bodies, new to themselves and each other, intertwine in an innocent intimacy. His heart's beat echoes in his throat, wrists, groin, and ankles. They hold each other, killing time which seems so limitless to them. Every passing moment feels memorable. Every passing moment seems an investment, another clue in solving the mysteries of the adult world they are expected to enter. They've spent the whole evening pouring their hearts out to each other. He's told Gail personal things he'd never told anyone, about how strained things had become between him, his siblings, and his mother, about how she comes home every night, angry, and about his father, why he left, and how Dad, having a new family, makes him feel cast aside. Gail's also given thoughtful answers to all his questions. She's spoken of dreams and fear, and she shared her greatest tragedy and most exhilarating victory. Gail settles back into the seat, tucking her head against his chest, and the pair fall into a comfortable hush. The logical portion of my mind tells me I need to be progressing. My time is finite, and I should be doing something productive to move things forward, but a deeper voice inside me is saying, what I'm doing is important. I can derive something priceless from reliving these moments. I'm not procrastinating. I'm pursuing an unspoken yearning to be here and to feel these things once more. The car disappears, and as darkness fades into light, I realize we're back in the school. It's a few days later. 17-year-old me closes his locker and wipes his sweaty palms against his jeans. His shallow breathing deepens as he tugs his backpack strap over his shoulder. He walks with purpose and finds Gail, who is on one knee collecting books from her locker. She senses his approach and looks up with a friendly smile. "Hey, you," she says. "Hi, Gail," he replies. "So we have our practice for the talent show tonight, and I was, since it's Friday and we don't have school tomorrow, I was planning on heading down to the music store." "Fire music?" she asks with a calm that draws a stark contrast to his unease. Yeah, and I was planning on heading there after school and before rehearsal. Sounds like fun. Would you... I mean, you could come if you wanted to. I'd like you to. Hang out and stuff. Maybe we could get something to eat, too. I'd totally pay and everything. Wow, that was tough to listen to. I'd love to. Yeah? Yeah, all right. So, yeah, cool. Cool. Yeah. Cool. The lockers shrink and bend, quickly transforming into the racks and bins of the record store, where I'd begun my musical education. This was where I'd spent hours as a teenager thumbing through each box of vinyl, seeking out elusive rarities, unearthing hidden treasures. This is where I bought my first Weird Al LP, and fleshed out his early catalog, from Titular to Bad Hair Day. It's where I was introduced to the rest of Dr. Demento's catalog of demented tunes, and the same location broadened my tastes. Thanks to Fire Music, my collection expanded to include everyone from Barry Manilow to NWA, from Louis Armstrong to Frank Zappa. Jewels You Were Meant for Me pipes over the shop speakers, and I remember making a mental note to add that track to the mixtape of my life. There's a certain awkward stiffness between Gail and my younger self as they test, with tentative touches and discreet glances, whether the closeness they felt the other night was a flash that is burned out or a flame to be stoked. They warm up to each other the way teenagers have for centuries, by criticizing one another. Should I call you Paul or Mud? He turns crimson. You heard about that. I did a bit of detective work on your background.
Mud?
Nicholas gives me a sideways glance.
Was that the nickname you were telling me about earlier? The one from camp?
I smack my lips and fess up. Yes, it is.
Story?
Freshman year, same day as the fire extinguisher incident. We were in orientation, and I kept asking stupid questions. Mr. Renzi said if I asked one more, my name was Mud. Of course I did, and it was probably the most memorable joke of my adolescence.
What was your question?
Laughing, I say. Okay, so he was warning us about the punishment for public displays of affection, and I asked if it counted if it was just me, by myself. Waiting for a bigger punchline, Nicholas asks,
That's your most memorable joke?
Nicholas, to a room full of teenagers, that's the gold standard of comedy. Jeff Murdoch got me back for always announcing him in the halls by calling me that, and, well, like I said, camp already had 2 other Pauls, including Paul Ball, so I suggested they call me Mud. Nicholas extends his arms as if presenting me to a crowd.
And thus a legend was born.
I think that's what I'm going to call you, Gail says, leaning against a stool in one of the aisles. Not a lot of people know you by that name. Just your closest friends. She lifts herself until she's perched on top. She grabs Mud by the hand and pulls him toward her. And we're close, right? You can call me Mud if you want. He presses his thighs against her knees, placing his hands on either side of her waist and tucking her head under his chin. Did you notice I shaved? She reaches for his face and runs the back of her hand against his cheek. Electricity runs through his body as he melts into the floor. That's the moment, I say to Nicholas. Nothing has ever been so pure to me as what I felt just then. Skepticism floods Nicholas's features.
You've been comparing the moments of your life to this.
I don't answer his nagging question.
You can't measure exploration against discovery, or value a fleeting moment over the fruits of labor.
Staring at Nicholas in annoyance, I say, if the Santa gig fails, I'm sure you do a bang-up job of writing fortune cookies. Gail slides off the stool and strolls amongst the vintage vinyl. My mom is so funny, she says. Every time I spend time with a boy, she thinks he's my boyfriend. She almost didn't let me out tonight. She looks over her shoulder as if testing him. With no experience with women, he tries and fails to decipher her expression, but I recognize it for what it is. She's challenging him, daring him to make his move. The sign says, please wait. A server will seat you. Nicholas and I turn toward the voice and pivot through time and space into a 24-hour diner. Gail gives Mud a devil-may-care glance as she walks through the dining room, spinning with her arms out like Maria in The Sound of Music. Oh, come on. Don't you want some say in picking our table? Mud finds himself agreeing with Gail. He pushes past the hostess podium and gallops to her side. She tucks her arm into the crook of his elbow, and they walk together like a couple shopping for the new family car. What do you think of this one? Oh, too pedestrian. Much too small to suit our purposes. Indubitably. And this lovely table? Equal distance from the front door and the kitchen. But there's an air conditioning vent just overhead. Ah, yes. How do you feel about corner booths? Oh, I love them. I turn away from the budding couple and walk toward the large window looking out into the dark parking lot. Outside, in a pool of lamplight, Gail and Mud walk to her car. She has a carry-out bag in one hand and his hand in the other. She makes a move for the door. He pulls her close. They gaze teasingly at each other, their eyes alight with passion and uncertainty. They draw fathomless breaths until he finally leans in for his first kiss. It's quickly followed by his second, his third. He loses count as she pushes her body into his. So close now, he worries she'll notice his excitement and flee in terror. She doesn't run. Instead, she stands on her tiptoes and runs her fingers through the scruff of hair at the nape of his neck. It's a perfect moment. If only it could last forever. In her arms, he is filled with an overwhelming sense of purpose. It's as though he's getting a peek into his destiny, as though the chaos of life makes sense. Those feelings gnaw at me now. I've felt numb for years. There have been so many days since this moment, and nothing since has had its glow. Nothing has come with this overwhelming awe of newness. I've changed too much. I've abused myself. I've shunned wonder and shut myself off. This nostalgia makes me speculate if it's her I've been missing all this time. It's not a new thought. I've mulled it over before, but here it is, all laid out for me. Lightning crashes and it begins to rain. I'm outside now, with them. Mud is drenched. His hair strings wetly across his tormented face as he watches Gail escape into the storm. I don't accept your apology, he says, stabbing a finger at her. Is that what you expect from me? She opens her car door and shuts him out. Looking at him through the streaming glass of her window, she starts the engine and shifts into reverse. She seems more than a little afraid of him. I wish I'd never met you, says Mud. Don't call. Don't acknowledge me. Don't come to my house. Just forget I exist. He repeats his last sentence as she pulls away, her taillights disappearing in the distance. In the darkness, slick pavement, wet from rain, mirrors light, but not the way it is. The smudged reflection seems to come from an impressionist's brush, withholding detail. Emotion is the only remnant. Another flash, and I stand in a snowdrift up to my thighs. The old pickup waits in a parking space nearby as my drunken doppelganger searches for his lost keys. He stumbles, groping in the dark. His phone slips out of his pocket, smashing on the freshly shoveled sidewalk. He teeters, almost toppling headlong into the concrete. As he squints at his newly cracked screen, he thinks back to a moment in his past he wishes he could forever change.